Back everybody, and today we're going to be looking at the different types of leaderships that the authors mentioned in chapter 12. We're going to take a look at transformational leadership and the difference between it and transactional leadership. We're also going to take a look at charismatic leadership and other attributes of leadership as well. So let's go ahead and start as we continue on with chapter 12 and contemporary issues in leadership. Welcome back everybody, and today we are going to continue on with contemporary views of leadership in organizations. Yesterday we looked at the Hersey-Blanchard model, and then we looked at the leader-member exchange, the LMX. So today we're going to go ahead and take a look at a few more models that are contemporary and are very effective today. Now, the different approaches to leadership. And today we're going to look at transformational leadership, we're going to look at charismatic leadership, and then finally we're going to look at attributions of leadership. Now, as we take a look at these different types, I want you to picture in your mind a leader who stood out in each one of these categories. Who is it that most typifies what these types of leadership characteristics entail? Transformational leadership, let's start with that. It's a set of abilities that allow the leader to recognize the need for change, to create a vision to guide that change, and to execute the change effectively. Now, change is a constant in business and really in everything today. Because of diversity and technology and globalization, from a business standpoint, change is the only real constant there is. It's the only thing we can rely on to stay constant. And to be able to facilitate change is a quality that is really you're worth your weight in gold if you are a transformational leader. This means a transformational leader means that you can take the status quo and stir them to action, to do new things, to try out new things. Jesus was a transformational leader. Look at what he did with the disciples. Look at how he took the most unlikely individuals and changed the world. And he didn't need a focus group. He didn't need all types of consultants. He didn't need a big organization. Jesus was able to do with 12 in a relatively short amount of time, 3 years, and alter the world because of them. So transformational leadership, what it does is take a person, a group, an organization, from the mindset of let's just stay where we're at to being willing and able to take on new possibilities and new goals and objectives and so forth. Now, there's a guy named Jack Mesereau who developed the model of transformational learning. And I really like his model because it's the model today that I believe is necessary if we're going to transform people. Now, let's distinguish, first of all, the difference between a transformational leader and a transactional leader. A transactional leader is just someone who is getting the job done. Let's go ahead and let's add on or let's expand our operation. You can do that without really being challenged or without being transformed. Transaction is as it says. You tell them what to do, they do it, that's it. You have a zero-sum gain after that. A transformational leader will change and challenge, and from that the person grows and they discover new ways of thinking. Now, Mesereau developed his model of transformational learning, and he said most transformations start with what he calls a disorienting dilemma. And this disorienting dilemma will challenge our preconceived ideas, our paradigms, our way of thinking. For instance, let's look at ministry, for instance. I was never raised to really have a mission-oriented mind. I grew up in a little retirement community, and our church was just a little Baptist church. We didn't have mission trips. We didn't have a lot of outreach opportunities and so forth. We gave to Lottie Moon and Annie Armstrong and all of the mission-oriented programs, but I was never really convicted or never really shown the importance of missions until I went on my first mission trip. And actually, I was way up into my adulthood in my 40s before I even went on my first mission trip. So I never really had a sensitivity to missions, and I knew the Great Commission and I knew where to give, but I never really let mission work become something that I would concern myself with. And then I went on my first mission trip, and the first mission trip I went on was to Central America, and it was like a whole new world was opened up to me. What I saw were people who were living in abject poverty, worshiping richly and fully the Lord Jesus Christ. And I saw how people lived a different way, how they were able to have just as substantive a worship experience as we do in our air-conditioned buildings and so forth. And that really challenged me. It convicted me. What also convicted me was the amount of false religions that were prevailing in those regions. Wiccans, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. They were meeting in upscale buildings with air conditioning, and the Christians were meeting in hollowed out shells of a building with no air conditioning or lighting or anything, but yet they still praised the Lord. So that was a disorienting dilemma to me. That challenged what I had thought before, and you might have experienced, and I'm sure you have, in different ways. Many people, when they, in my generation, we grew up and we were surrounded by racism. And then when we got out of the house and we were able to go to different places, we experienced a whole different world where racism wasn't as prevalent. Being from the South, and that's where I was, I was exposed to that. Then when I joined the Navy, I saw really a whole different world. So that would be a disorienting dilemma. But now once you experience that dilemma, you seek out different ways of experimenting with new ideas. For me, it was being more, from a mission standpoint, it was being more involved in missions. So you're going to try out different alternatives. You're going to see if other people feel the same way, or if they have experienced what you've experienced, and that kind of forms a support group as you transform. And once you've done all these things, you choose the alternative that works for you. And a lot of times it will be a new way of thinking and a new way of behavior. For me, as from a mission standpoint, I became more involved in missions and efforts to support missions. And for others, it may be different things that they have decided makes more sense and fits within their worldview and paradigm more smoothly. So that would be transformational leadership. Jesus challenged the current thinking of the day, and that was a disorienting dilemma. Don't think that the disciples and those who gave their lives to Christ didn't have that experience when Christ challenged what they had believed. You remember when Jesus taught, he said, "You have heard this, but I tell you this." Jesus is saying, listen, this is how you grew up. This is your paradigm, but this is what I'm telling you now. And I'm sure that challenged them. It caused a conflict of self and conscience and religion, that they had to work out. And working it out is all a part of the transformational process until they see, well, Jesus is right. Christianity, following Christ, is the way. That, for me, that's the only hope I have. I had to face it when I was saved. You've had to face it when you were saved. And hopefully you were transformed, because that's what's supposed to take place. But with transformational leadership, you challenge the status quo. You offer the means and the ways of being able to get out of the status quo to a new direction and a new way of doing things and a new vision. And you help them facilitate the process of them moving from the old way to the new way. And that's what a transformational leader will do. Now think about some of the transformational leaders who have had a big impact on your life. What was it about them that changed you? Was it a pastor? Was it a business leader? Was it a president or a political figure? Who was? And of course, Jesus. That's the default for all of us. So don't use him. But who were some transformational leaders who challenged you to think in different ways, to get out of your comfort zone and to do different things? That's what a transformational leader is, and that's going to be one of your forum discussion topics as you look at transformational leadership and also charismatic leadership. Charismatic leadership, this is more of a personal characteristic of the leader. And these individuals, as you see here, inspire support and acceptance. Their leadership is based on their leader's personal charisma. Now, we often stereotype charismatic leadership with dictators and TV evangelists and people who have been able to manipulate others throughout the years and the ages to seek their own end and obtain their own end. And there are certainly people like that. I mean, charismatic leader is an effective leadership ability, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a positive or it's used in a positive way. Most all of the people you see on television who are these TV evangelists, they're charismatic. They have a personality that endears others to them. They know how to talk in public. They know how to use their voice and their facial expressions and know what to say to be able to manipulate and to get what they want. When you take a look at Hitler, Hitler was able to endear himself to the German people who were already downcast. They were already as low as they could go. They were demoralized as a country. And then we see Hitler being able to rouse their patriotic nationalist spirit, and he used it for nefarious ends. And it actually brought the destruction of Germany and himself. But charismatic leaders, Martin Luther King Jr., I guess you could say, Abraham Lincoln maybe, let's say John F. Kennedy, Billy Graham, I believe. Even though Billy Graham was not a very flamboyant individual, he had enough charisma so that people trusted him and they wanted to follow him. So think about some charismatic leaders also, and I want you to discuss them as well. And then attribution perspective of leadership. And this holds that when behaviors are observed in a context associated with leadership, others may attribute varying levels of leadership ability or power to the person displaying those behaviors. In other words, what makes a leader? Is it genetics or is it upbringing? And we thought in the past, as I believe mentioned earlier, that early theories about leadership attributed that to a person's ability, their innate ability. And we looked at their height and sex and other physical characteristics. We even measured the bumps on their head to see if they had the inclination towards leadership. And then we evolved from there to thinking that you could just be trained to be a leader, but we saw also that that doesn't work. So today, we have varying levels of leadership ability or power to the person displaying those behaviors. So it may be ways that others, and I believe that people are born with it, but I also believe that people can take what they're born with and have it enhanced or complemented with the amount of training and development that goes along with leadership. Now, the charismatic leader, as you see, they can cast a vision, and really that's important. Even the Bible says that without a vision, the people are in disarray. They perish. In some versions that say that. They energize. They're able to motivate people, get them going. They enable. They give personal support. They express their confidence in the people. They empathize. And if you remember from yesterday in our Hersey Blanchard model, we saw where encouraging is one of the key latter features of situational leadership. As they learn the task, we need to start focusing then on encouraging them and developing them their motivation. So you have those areas. And this is why I said at the very beginning, folks, that a leader has to be able to influence people. That's the difference between, one of the major differences between leadership and management. You can manage without having to do any of these three. Managers really don't have to cast a vision. That's the leader's job. Managers don't have to energize. All they have to do is take what has been energized and organize it and give it direction and so forth and enabling. Now, managers, it's good to be able to do that. But again, I've managed more than 900 people and I never saw any of them. I was sitting in Memphis, Tennessee, managing the careers of over 900 people who were scattered out all over the United States. And I never called one, I never talked to one, I didn't know any of them. But yet I was able to effectively manage all of their professional needs and endeavors and career paths. So these are some of the differences that we see with management and leadership. Now, when we see the alternatives to leadership, first of all, we have leadership substitutes, and then we have leadership neutralizers. Well, what is a leadership substitute? Well, a leadership substitute means that really there's no need for the leader. Other attributes or other things come into play that really negate the need for a leader. For instance, the individual professionalism. Now, when it comes to motivation theory, you have theory X and theory Y. Theory X would say that people are by nature lazy and you're going to have to micromanage them. If not, then as soon as you turn your back, they're going to cheat you or try to get away with stuff. That's not a very optimistic point of view, but that's been the view that many have maintained throughout the years, historically or traditionally. Now, theory Y indicates that people are motivated, that they want to do a good job and will do a good job as long as we encourage that through, first of all, developing them and empowering them and supporting them. So you have that individual professionalism. Also, some people just are professional enough to do a good job, and that's what really Theory Y says. They're going to do a good job no matter what. They also will indicate that or show a large sign of intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation means that people are motivated to do a good job for tangible results, such as pay, promotions, this, that, and the other. Intrinsically motivated individuals are going to do the job just because it's in them to do a good job. They have that level of professionalism here that drives them to do a good job. And that's also motivation, experience and training. If I have if I have experience in training, I really don't need a leader. If I'm motivated and if I have enough professionalism, then I'm going to do a good job with or without leadership. Indifference to rewards. Now again, if I'm intrinsically motivated, tangible rewards aren't going to make a big difference. So they can substitute or even neutralize the need for leaders. Also too, the group norms and the group cohesiveness, the group dynamics will determine to a large extent whether or not they need leadership there. The job, if it's structured and automated, that can be a neutralizer for leadership. For instance, if you're on an assembly line and that assembly line only goes so fast and you only have one job to do, it makes no difference who the leader is. You can only do what you can do, and that assembly line is going to only go so fast. So these are some of the things that you can look at that would neutralize a leader. Rigid procedures and rules, explicit goals and objectives, rigid reward system. That really negates the need for leadership. You know, the organization puts it out. The people know within the organization what's expected of them. All they have to do is just go and follow the rules. So there are different things that can substitute for leadership when the people are going to do the job themselves, really. And what we see today, especially with groups, we see self-managed work groups. And these people police themselves. They know what they have to do, so they govern themselves. They make sure that they do the work as a group, and they hold each other accountable. So these are some of the things that can either substitute or neutralize leadership that you need to be aware of also. Today we considered some of the dimensions of leadership, the difference between transformational and transactional. You know, as I mentioned in my lecture, Jesus was a transformational leader. He took the most unlikely individuals that he could find and he made them into world changers. And you know, if we could apply some of these principles as well, think about what we could do in our ministries and in our businesses as we do more than just tell a person what to do, but we inspire them, we motivate them, we develop them, and think about the dividends that that's going to produce if we just take the time to be more transformational than transactional. Well, that's all we have for today, and we'll carry on with the rest of Chapter 12 tomorrow.